some of this hate.
Now, I don't know if you call them microaggressions, but you had some interesting points you spoke to me about regarding even honorifics and the degree to which somebody is addressed by their first name versus addressed by Madam Speaker, for example.
Well, I've noticed, and I'm guilty of this too, how often when we're talking about a female politician do you say, oh, Kamala said this, and not Vice President Harris?
Mm-hmm.
I would argue that I would say Biden, but I wouldn't say Joe necessarily.
There's so many Joes out there, not a lot of Kamalas.
Correct. And is this a result of, there are more Joe, Johns, and Mikes than there are Kamalas and Jacindas? And I was going to say Sanna, but I think Finland Prime Minister Sanna Marin is someone that we refer to by her full name and title. But, one of the Forbes Women contributors wrote about how calling female politicians by their first name is a sign of sexism. And we see it much, much more with women than we do men just being called Yo Joe. There was a study in 2019 that looked at speakers who were introducing other speakers on stage. And when women were introducing a speaker, like, hi, I'm Maggie McGrath, and I'm here to present you with Assistant Managing Editor Diane Brady, women used that full title 96% of their time in their introduction. When men were doing the introduction, it would be, hi, I'm Mike McGrath, this is Diane Brady. 49% of the time. There's a huge difference in just using the title, which is fascinating to me.
Well, I remember this now probably infamous Zoom call where one of the speakers asked to be addressed by her title as a doctor, essentially, and the person leading the meeting, who was a politician, refused in essence, and it was a power struggle. It was a young black woman, and it's that those honorifics mean a lot, especially when you don't naturally come to the table with power. It's sort of, in a way, like getting a professional degree, used to be for certain immigrants. You don't have to explain yourself. So is that something you've noticed yourself as well, that as women we care a lot about having those honorifics, or do we care if somebody addresses us by our first name?
I think we care. I think when you have studied for your PhD and someone calls you Mrs. in the context in which
everybody else is a doctor,
that's offensive. I have friends who they felt slighted. And I think it comes down to what the other person's intent is. I think a lot of women are understanding if someone doesn't know their title and just says Ms. or Madam out of a sign of respect, but perhaps not full knowledge. But when you're dealing with a colleague, with a mother-in-law, with a family-in-law who decides to address a card to Mrs. instead of doctor, that feels like a twist of a knife to a lot of women.
To bring it back to Jacinda Ardern and the burnout that she felt, did we see this same lack of respect, whether it was in how she was addressed or how she was described or covered in the media?
It's interesting, right? So she came to politics amid this wave of what was called Jacinda mania. And that to me didn't feel like that was disrespectful. That was a nod to how popular she was at the time. I think the politics of COVID have been so polarizing that she would have received a certain amount of hate no matter her gender if it had been someone else in the prime minister's seat at the height of the pandemic, at the height of enacting these policies. I think there would have been some. Would there have been as much? Probably not. And here's where I would point to, would this have happened with a male prime minister? A few months ago, I'm sure you saw, Finland Prime Minister Sanna Marin went on a diplomatic mission, an economic mission, they wanted to talk about trade, to New Zealand. The two were giving a press conference. Now, Prime Minister Marin unseated former Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern as the youngest female prime minister in the world. So there's a natural curiosity on the part of reporters about what's it like as a young female prime minister. But this shock jock radio DJ, I really think was trying to troll, because it was not a thoughtful question about the experience and the way gender informs their policies, which also neither woman likes to talk about.
How can you ever know?
Right, how can you ever know, right? But it was a question of like, are you talking, I'm going to butcher it because it was so bad, but it was like, are you talking about your ages? Like, are you talking about what it's like to be a young female prime minister? Like, are you having a fun chat? Was the sense of the conversation.
Hey, girls, what's the girl talk?
And former Prime Minister Ardern was like, I'm curious, would you have asked that question of Barack Obama and John Keyes, another former New Zealand prime minister who apparently was just like 5 days off of Obama's birthday. So they're very close in age, but I don't think anyone asked them if they're talking about birthday twinning when they're on a prime.
You know, it's